Hello and welcome to Eastern Roman History. Today I am joined once again by Emanuele Rizzardi, who previously came on my channel to talk about Alexios Philanthropenos and the 13th century. Now we shall be talking about the usurper Eugenius and paganism in the late Roman Empire. Hello, Emanuele.
Hi all. I am very glad to be with you again. Last time I enjoyed a lot to speak about Alexios Philanthropenos and also to be in contact with you, with all the people who made questions and who spoke with us about the topic. And I hope that this topic will be interesting for you all in the same way.
I think it is a very a fascinating time period religiously for the religious makeup of the empire, how it really shifted from being very much a pagan empire to being a predominantly Christian one in roughly the space of 100 years, from Constantine the Great to Theodosius, who really puts the nail in the coffin for paganism as the competing religion in the empire.
Totally agree.
So why don't we talk a little bit about, to start off, why don't we define a little bit about what we're talking about? So what is paganism in the 4th century? What are we talking about when we say Roman?
This is a huge question because we speak about paganism, but in reality paganism is just a way we modern people try to merge a lot of elements of tradition, culture, and religious behaviors of people in ancient times and in late antiquity. What we call paganism is just what we can call the old ways, the old Roman tradition, and the old beliefs in the gods like Mars, Jupiter, etc. But not just this. Because in the field of the paganism, we have to consider also monotheistic religions, very popular among the Romans. Most of them were already inside the Roman Republic. So we are speaking of very well spread religions, like, for example, Mithraism, very famous. We had even in the last decade some movies about Roman soldiers who worshipped Mithras. So he is a very famous deity of Persian origin, and this is very peculiar. Roman people worshipping a Persian deity. But this is a story for another time. Also, for example, some Egyptian gods like Isis were very famous in the Roman Empire. Cybele, another deity of Anatolia, was pretty much well known. We have temples, for example, in Rome or even in Gaul, in Britain, and etc. And also there were other kind of deities like Celtic deities who were merged with the Roman deities, and it's very hard to say, but they created some kind of mixture of religious elements from the Roman tradition, the Celtic tradition, other tradition they found random in the world, and this has become, in the late antiquity, a new way to venerate deities. For example, the cult of Epona, the horse goddess, was common in the Gaul world and in the Roman world too. And in the late antiquities, Gaul Roman people continued to worship Epona in the Gaul form and in the Roman form. And also, last but not least, with paganism, we also consider some kind of philosophy made up by the most important philosophers in the late antiquity, like for example Symmachus, who in fact were not worshipping many gods, were pretty much polytheistics, monotheistics. They venerated in some ways Zeus or Jupiter, like father of all the deities, and but not like Jupiter is one god and the other deities are other gods. Jupiter is just the main expression of the god, and the other deities are like a minor expression of Jupiter himself. And also they venerated some kind of late philosophy, for example the Uno of Plotin, a very popular author in that time, who basically using philosophy tried to explain how deity and gods works. And so all of these beliefs are what we called and we call nowadays paganism.
The term paganism.
But when you see what is paganism, the short reply by me is, well, it's complicated to say it because paganism is not a religion. Paganism is a lot of things. And this is very, very important to say. And also because paganism is a modern name and an offensive name, because paganism derived from pagus, so inhabitant of a countryside, because in the medieval time people of countryside were the one who remained pagans. So the people in the city said, oh, they are pagans, so they are wrong people living in the countryside, like devil worshippers, uncivilized people and stuff, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you've put it very well, actually. That paganism is kind of Roman polytheism and philosophies like Neoplatonism, where there is kind of a metaphysics to it, and the Peripatetics, the followers of Aristotle's metaphysics. So the one, like the one grand mover of the universe and stuff like that. So it's a whole plethora of things. Perhaps one way of putting it is that it isn't Christianity or Judaism. It's like other.
Yes.
And that is exactly how the Christians pretty much refer to them. As you were saying, that the pagan, which is derived from the Latin word paganus, as you say, means rustic or rural. So a Christian calling someone a pagan is basically, it's a country bumpkin. It's it's some stupid person from the countryside.
Yeah, like let me tell it, like redneck or similar, something like it.
Which is quite interesting because later on, when Julian tries to create his pagan religion, he always calls the Christians the Galileans. And also, paganism is not the exclusive way for Christians to refer to pagans. They also use terms like Gentiles, which is straight from the Bible, as also Hellenism or Hellenes.
Yes.
Like the religion of the ancient Greeks.
Yes, that was very common during the Middle Ages, especially Hellenics or Hellenes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's very interesting. So, why don't we talk a little bit about Eugenius? Since we've introduced what paganism is, let's talk about Eugenius. Who is he? What were the circumstances of that time? And just a little bit about his usurpation.
Yes. So to start, we have to say that at one point, the Roman Empire was controlled by two emperors, Theodosius, the very famous Theodosius in the east, and Valentinian III in the west. Valentinian III was a child, in fact, and he was controlled he was a puppet by Theodosius and by Ambrose, the Archbishop of Milan, who is very, very famous, especially in my area because I live near in Milan. He was a very important, not only a religious figure, but also a political figure. Valentinian II, yes. Someone correct me. Sorry for that. This is a live streaming, and I'm not reading a paper. And this is not my mother tongue, so forgive me for every mistake I made, and I will make in the future. So at one point, Valentinian II died. The circumstances are not clear to us, but we have to
hanged in his room in Vienna in the 15th of May, 392. Historians. I believe Brian Croke wrote an essay about the death of Valentinian II, and he believed that it was suicide, that because of the circumstances of, he was basically a prisoner in his own empire. He had tried to escape the power of Arbogast. He had failed, and he had also failed to enlist the support of Theodosius I in the east. And it seems that he decided to end his own life, which put Arbogast in a bit of a situation, because he was, I think that's partly where the second tradition of he was murdered by Arbogast starts to come from, especially with Theodosian propaganda, is that Arbogast is being blamed for Valentinian II's death one way or the other. So he's responsible for the death of one of the legitimate emperors, which isn't good. And he eventually, because Arbogast is a Frank, so he's not a Roman citizen, but he is in the Roman army and is in Roman service, he is basically in charge. He is the Magister Militum in the West.
Yes, he was pretty much like Stilicho. An half-breed, half Roman and half Frank, and he was in charge of the army of the West at that time.
Yeah, so he can't proclaim himself emperor because, well, it would be unpolitical to do so, and very it would put him in a spot of bother, so to speak. But
so it was not legal.
Yeah, it would be illegal. So he raises a full Roman citizen, a man called Eugenius, as emperor instead, on the 22nd of August of that year.
Yes,
so
correct.
A couple of months later.
He chose Eugenius, who were made up as emperor in Lugdunum in Gaul, because Arbogast was in charge of the army of the Gaul, basically. Why Eugenius, and who was Eugenius? Eugenius was a grammatic, a teacher, and a philosopher. He was working in Rome. And after some time, we have very, very scattered information about it. He moved to Vienna, the capital, in fact, because Valentinian was living there, and he was in charge of the Magister Officiorum. So I don't know how to say, people in charge of the correspondence, the sending letters, basically.
Yeah.
This could be could make us to think it was fun, but in reality it was a very important task because letters and correspondence were very important at that time to stretch all the information around the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And Eugenius was a close friend of Arbogast. They probably meet each other in Milan when Arbogast was just a teenager or so, because Eugenius was like 10 years older than Arbogast. And
I believe he was also a teacher, a Eugenius, before he became a bureaucrat.
Well,
Or
is it possible? Is it possible just because he was good with letters and with people, but also because Arbogast, who was in charge in the army and in the control of the emperor, wanted a close friend close to him, because Theodosius was trying to control the court of Vienne. So there were just like this soft fight in order to control the emperor and the court in the west. Yeah. Eugenius was recruited to be the new emperor, but in the end he accepted. What we can say about him is that he was a Christian. And Theodosius and people close to Theodosius said that he was in reality a crypto-pagan, so a fake Christian, and he just faked to be Christian. But we have to say that probably it was not true, because first, Eugenius, when was supported by the Pagans in the Roman Empire, continued to be a Christian. So if you are a fake Christian and Pagans are on your side, you just say, oh, I'm not a Christian in reality, I'm pagan like you, and you unveil your true face. But he didn't do it, so probably he was a true Christian. And also he was, second point, he was very tolerant among the Christians and the pagan in both ways. In fact, other people like Nicomaco Flavianus wanted to wipe out the Christians, like Julian, or even worse, like Diocletian. But Eugenius didn't want it. He tried to maintain a very precarious situation among the Roman pagans and the Christian pagans. This was wrong. Roman Christians and pagan Christians, okay. And this was a very difficult situation for him. But we are pretty much sure that he was a true Christian. So next question, why he chose to support the pagans in the Roman Empire and not to be one of the many usurpers like Constant III, like for example the rebellious magister in the Britain, usurper Maximus. Maximus Magnus, exactly, who rebelled just a few years before him.
I was going to bring up an interesting point, how you were saying about how Theodosian sources that supported Theodosius I, like Socrates, they paint Magnus Maximus as a heretic later, although despite the fact that he was actually a Nicene Christian like Theodosius and persecuted the Priscillian heresy, I believe. He targeted heretics in the Western Empire and was a through and through Christian. And then Theodosius, he can't his propaganda isn't able to rewrite the fact that he was a Christian, but he turns it on his head and say he's a heretic, which gives him a bit more a boost to his defeating him. So it's more justification for getting rid of him. And it's interesting how that same tactic of propaganda is used for Eugenius, who, as you're right, he was a Christian, and he seems to have been a genuine Christian as well, and not just a lip service to it.
Yes.
But it's turned against him by Theodosian propaganda by saying he is a pagan. He's the devil incarnate kind of thing.
Yes, so the victory of Theodosius was even more great because, hey, I'm the man of God who won in battle against the heretics, the pagans, the Athenians, and stuffs. And not just, hey, I am Theodosius and I won against an usurper, a random one. So, why Eugenius, being a Christian, supported the pagans? Well, this is a matter of debate. We have two schools of thought about it. The first possibility is that he was like a true kind man. He was very tolerant. He was inspired by his studies, his kind art and stuffs, and so he really wanted to let coexist Christians and pagans. So this is one of the possibilities. The second one, and this is the most dark one, if you let me say it, is just that he in reality didn't care about the pagans, but he basically was forced to support them because without them he would have not won against Theodosius, because the pagans in the West were the most important Roman senatorial families and the most part of the army. So he was forced to support them.
Pagans were generally more numerous in the West than in the East, which was far more Christianized by that point, whereas the West was Christian, but still had large pockets of pagans, as you say, in the army, and also most of the Roman Senate were still pagans. The most famous being Symmachus, who he was really an advocate for the altar of victory because it had been removed by Gratian in 382.
This one was one of the most important events at that time, also because we see like a legal debate, like a fight between lawyers in order to see if the altar of victory could be restored or not. And probably the situation of the altar of victory was one of the key points who led the people of the Roman Senate to revolt and to support Arbogast. Because the first thing that Eugenius and Arbogast with him proposed was like, if we support our rebellion against Theodosius, we will restore the altar of victory inside the Senate. And so the senators supported them very, very quickly.
I believe the Senate approached Eugenius twice to ask for the restoration of the altar of victory. And this is during a period. So Eugenius, almost uniquely, was able to actually have a kind of proper reign as a usurper and not at no point recognized by Theodosius. And he is immediately asked to restore the altar. He refuses twice. And he does give concessions. So he refuses to restore the altar of victory, but also gives money to senators to start restoring some Roman pagan festivals and they're allowed to sacrifice again, apparently.
Yes.
And
this is sure.
There is, I'm not quite sure, there seem to be differences of opinions in the material, but it seems on the third occasion he did restore the altar. I mean, it was torn down again by Theodosius after Eugenius was defeated in 394, but maybe he did that did happen. That's like a final concession to get as many people of the upper classes on his side as possible.
Yes, the altar was restored. We are pretty much sure about this topic. And because this one was one of the key points also asked by Symmachus and Nicomaco Flavianus. So we are pretty much confident that before the Battle of the Frigidos, the altar was already restored. Just because, as you said, there were pagan festivals inside Rome, and this not make sense to have pagan festivals if we have not also the altar of victory restored. Probably, but we are not pretty much sure about it. They also enlightened again the sacred fire of the Vesta.
Ah, yes, because the Vestal Virgins had been disbanded by Gratian, I believe.
The last Vestal was Celia Concordia, and he was in the mid 30, if I remember well, during the the usurpation of Eugenius, and he were the last top Vestal. I don't know how to say it. The chief of the group of the Virgin Vestals.
The Vestals, yeah.
Yeah, the high priestess of the Vestals.
Yeah.
And also about the altar, we also know that we have the letters wrote by Symmachus to Ambrose and to Valentinian to restore the altar. And Symmachus say that he was not a pagan symbol; it was the symbol of Rome. So it must be restored. But Ambrose said no, because it was a pagan deity. So it's pretty much interesting to see that the Christian faction led by Ambrose made up pretty much just a religious question and a religious problematic. But on the other hand, the pagans were interested not only in the pagan stuffs, but also in the traditional stuffs, in the continuity of the tradition of the Roman Empire.
It's not just a pagan symbol; it's a Roman symbol, and that's why it should stay. That he also made a request to Valentinian II after Gratian had been killed to try and have it restored again, but he was refused. I think to understand a little bit the relationship of Christians and pagans at the time is, rather than a kind of straight up pagan or Christian faction, you have more of a spectrum of schools of thought at the time, and this is something which Alan Cameron, historian of late antiquity, is considered. And that I won't talk about wings, but on one extreme of the spectrum, you have the sort of ultra Christians who hate heretics, hate pagans, hate Jews, and want Christianity to become the dominant faith and everyone to become Christian. And you have people like Cyril of Alexandria, and I suppose you could count Ambrose in this group as well.
Pretty much, yes, in my opinion.
And people like that, and they're especially very champions of their dogma of Christianity. And then next along the scale, you have the more tolerant Christians who they are Christian. They don't like heretics or pagans necessarily, or Jews, but they're more interested in talking them out and using their Christian faith to try and defeat them dogmatically, and also more willing to accept sort of old practices, so to speak. So you have, I think a lot of the spectrum you see in the emperors you have during this century as well. So you have some emperors like Theodosius, where all the pagan temples get closed, all of the subsidies get taken away from them and their estates as well. Sacrifice gets banned. divination gets banned, and all of this kind of stuff. And then you have other emperors who are far more tolerant, like Valentinian I, who temples can stay open, but you can't have some of the less palatable things like animal sacrifice and divination. That's a no-no. But otherwise,
Yes.
so long as you don't do that, you pagans can carry on and do your own thing. And then you get the kind of the pagan side of that spectrum as well. You have people like Ammianus Marcellinus, who they are pagans and very hold to their beliefs very strongly, but they also object to more extreme pagans who are kind of almost the mirror image of the Christians in a way, who which do things which are continue pagan practices which aren't very palatable or have more bellicose opinions, like people like Julian the Apostate. In fact, one of the big criticisms of Julian is his overly, what the pagans call superstitious outlook to paganism. So he is a big believer in portents and oracles and things like that, and he sacrifices every morning. There's almost a joke made by Ammianus that had he come back from his Eastern campaign in victory, the Roman Empire would have run out of cattle because of the number of sacrifices he would have made. But and so he, as much as Ammianus loves Julian and his good deeds, he takes a dim view of the elements of paganism which had kind of gone out of fashion at that point, like divination, always seen a bit more as, he puts it as superstition rather than religion.
Yes, I agree with it.
And then you get the more devout end of paganism with people like Julian, who they're not that he would be who want to persecute Christians and so on. He's very clever in how he does it. He doesn't persecute them, but he releases all of the heretical bishops that have been exiled to make them fight amongst themselves. He endorses the Jews and Judaism, and tries to have the temple in Jerusalem rebuilt. He gives funding to pagan temples and reopens them, and also makes the clergy, removes their tax exemption. So now bishops have to pay taxes, which they have been exempt under Constantine the Great, and other of these punitive measures against them. So you do have this religious battle of over the 4th century about how does the empire work religiously? Is it a totally Christian empire where Christianity is the only accepted religion, Nicene Christianity at that, and then everyone else is to be second-class citizens and have laws prescribed against them, which is also eventually happens, or is it more of like a tolerant state where both pagans and Christians are allowed to live and just do them?
Well, basically, the situation was pretty much like not good and not bad for the pagans until the arrival of Theodosius. Yes, well, let's say paganism was already in crisis. We can speak about it like for hours, but just to say that paganism was less attractive than Christianity, especially in the time, because Christianity had a very structured hierarchy, So people could feel safe, could find the safety, and also hope for the afterlife following Christianity. And also Christianity promised very good stuffs in the afterlife, but let's say that the afterlife was pretty much possible for all the people. While paganism, in most of his ways, was pretty much cryptical about it. For example, in the classical Roman deities, if you are beloved by the gods, you go to Elysium, and if not, you go to the reign of to the Hades. Yeah. But it was not very. Yeah, you have not to. I don't know how to say it. In Christianity, if you do some kind of things, you go to paradise, and this is a sure thing. In paganism, you have not this sureness. You have to be beloved by the gods if you are brave, if you everything the gods want, and you follow the gods. But this is not granted. Also, is very different the approach that God have with people in Christianity and in paganism, because in most of the paganism, especially in the one of the antiquity, the gods are fighting each other, and they basically don't care about human beings. They just do what they want. Christianity is very different in this way of approach. So Christianity was very much more attractive than the old gods. And also, and this is the main point of Constantine I, Christianity was very good because you can build up like one god and one emperor chosen by God, and so this emperor is like an emanation of God on earth. So at one point, Constantine said, okay, this religion is very good to make the Roman Empire great again, to make a Roman Empire survive. And so Christianity was adopted as one of the main faiths. But at that time, Christianity was already important inside the empire. We have to consider that during Diocletian, like 10% of the population was Christian. And after Constantine, like half of the population was already Christian, like at the time of Theodosius. So Christianity was already rising through the stars with.
Just to interrupt and to add to that point about how Christianity was really starting to spread by the 3rd century and early 4th century. So from sarcophagi, so stone coffins in Rome from AD 270 to 400, there is a breakdown of statistics which I found. So from the period 270, so that's the time of Emperor Aurelian and that sort of time, right in the middle of the crisis of the 3rd century, to AD 300, so Diocletian's time, you had there are 859 sarcophagi in total, and of those, 92% of those are for pagan individuals, and only 8% are for Christians. Then, between the period 300 and 330, so the later tetrarchy in the reign of Constantine the Great, you have 780 sarcophagi. Of those, 41% are pagan and 59% are Christian. So already you've had a massive change in the religious demographic of the people being buried in these sarcophaguses. So these wouldn't necessarily be ordinary people, but maybe more well-to-do senators or equestrians. But even so, it's a massive change in a relatively short amount of time. And then from the period from 330 to 400, not only does the number of sarcophagi go down from 780 to 337, so there is also lots of social and cultural changes going on, but also the number of those 337 sarcophagi go from 4% pagan and 96% are Christian. So you have this huge religious shift during this century, especially after Constantine the Great, where Christianity really climbs to the top of just being, in general, the dominant religion within the empire, and sort of replacing paganism. It is putting up a good fight, and you have lots of famous individuals from the 4th and 5th century who are pagans, like Porphyry or Ammianus Marcellinus and Libanius. But Christianity is really starting to take hold in the late 3rd and 4th century, which it hadn't before. So yes, as you were saying, the attractiveness of Christianity was also a big thing. So I think you do have the debates between heresies and paganism and kind of the stuff that happens in the big cities and in the big courtrooms and so on. But also on the ground, for the everyday people doing their business, Christianity is able to have an effect on these people, which paganism isn't. The local bishops are a source of authority.
Yes.
Some people look to them as judges in local cases, or to look after their children as orphans and look after the sick and orphaned and disabled, whereas pagans wouldn't. And like a disabled child for pagans would usually left out and exposed, whereas in Christian families they would usually be either given to church authorities to look after or kept for children. So infanticide really declines in this period. And also charity. So the poor and destitute, which John Chrysostom says makes up 1/10 of the people in Antioch, they're able to look to Christian deacons and deaconesses and bishops and so on for charity and sustenance. And also you have the religious thing of even the poorest of men and women can go to heaven.
Yes, exactly.
Paganism doesn't really have anything like that. You have the big festival where you sacrifice a bull or something to the deity, and then that's pretty much it. And then you go about your life and so on. And this is something that Julian the Apostate had to really contend with when he was setting up his rival pagan church, pretty much. I think it's very telling that he had to take a lot of his points about this pagan church from the Christian church, because it was very well organized, had this effect on people. And also a lot of the bishops tried to be very virtuous people. And there is a letter by Julian to one of his high priests for Galatia in Anatolia, saying that one of the things that is making paganism uncompetitive is the lack of virtue among the people practicing it and trying to proselytize it. Whereas Christian priests a lot of them are doing what they're saying as well. So there's this big challenge for paganism during the 4th century of trying to also be competitive with the benefits of Christianity for lots of ordinary people. I don't know who says it, but there's a saying of Christianity is the religion of the slaves and women.
Yes.
And it's that kind of people, those sorts of people, the people at the very top tier of the amphitheater, that is most attracted to Christianity.
Yes, and also consider that the pagans had the problem that there was nothing like, okay, we are the pagans, we fight together against the Christians. Christianity itself was not united, of course, because heresies and stuffs. But paganism had even a bigger problem, because the pagans basically didn't even try to fight off Christianity. It was up to senatorial class and to some emperors like Julian, let's say Arbogast, even if he was not an emperor. Anthemius made an attempt. Marcellinus, the Magister Militum in Dalmatia, made some attempts. But there was no such thing like a united pagan front to fight off the Christians.
Yeah, I think that the most systematic attempt is by Julian, and it comes to nothing after his 18 months as emperor. So yes, I think that is important, that the pagans don't really have any sort of comeback to Christianity. And although the sort of debate about how religion works at the top of society for the emperor only becomes finalized with Theodosius, with the Edict of Thessalonica in 381, I believe, where he says that he passes a law where everyone in the empire should be worshipping God and Nicene Christianity. So by law, Christianity is the religion of the empire, and Nicene Christianity at that, and everyone else is in error. And then after Theodosius, you have the more prescriptive things happening, where you can't hold public office anymore if you're a pagan or something like that, and you start having more organized persecutions against pagans and Jews.
Yes. Theodosius basically is the end of the paganism, with the Thessalonica laws, with the fact that he took all the pagans in charge of the empire, especially in the west, and removed them. He just let spot some pagans to have small offices, like for example Rutilio Namatiano, after some years after the Battle of the Frigidos. But basically paganism was considered a crime. And after that the situation was over, basically, because with the fail of the Battle of the Frigidos, the religious battle was lost.
Yes, the coming back to the spectrum I spoke of, the ultra Christians had won, basically, and the debate was over. And after that point, paganism is kind of relegated to, and pagans to, second-class citizens in the empire, and they continue on until the reign of Justinian the Great, who initiates the last pagan, like major pagan persecution, where lots of laws are passed and reiterated against them. And after that point, the kind of more high-profile pagans like Damasius disappear.
Yes, at that time, paganism was just a matter of single people or just families. There were no more huge pagan communities. The last pagan community inside the Roman Empire I can remember is at the time of the Emperor Alexander, before Leo the Wise, who was claimed to have found a small pagan community in the heart of Asia Minor, and inside this community he found a golden ask, if I remember well, and he started to venerate this ask. But this situation is pretty much unclear because, of course, Alexander was never accused to be openly a pagan, even if he was accused to venerate an ask. So this is pretty much confusing. Even for the historian, the situation was not totally clear. I have an example, for example, by Professor Giorgio Ravegnani, high-level academical here in Italy. He said that Alexander was just like a naive. So a person interested in the, let's say, pagan background, but he was not a pagan. He was just like people nowadays interested into past things, like in the last century.
Yeah, I believe also in Alexander's case that he was dying at the time as well.
Yeah.
So
yes.
He was using the divination and magic and stuff he was using was kind of should probably be seen as like a last ditch, him trying anything to
yes, like a kind of superstition.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about the Battle of the Frigidos?
Well, the Battle of the Frigidos is probably the most important battle of the millennium, and it's very hard to speak about it in a few minutes, but I will try to do it. At one point, Theodosius rallied a very huge army and marched to Milan in order to decapitate the rebellion of Eugenius. Arbogast, who was probably the most important general of his time, found the valley of the river Frigidos as the most favorable ground to start a battle. The Frigidos is a river now in Slovenia, and at the time the valley was very fortified because it was supposed to fend off the incursions of the barbarians in the east. So Arbogast basically attacked the army of Theodosius and forced Theodosius to fight in an unfavorable background with no possibility to escape because the retreat was blocked and the flanks were also blocked, and even the Pagans led by Nicomachus Flavianus moved some pictures and statues of the pagan deities on the mountains in order to scare the Christians of Theodosius. So the battle was pretty much very favorable to Arbogast, and even we can say that Arbogast in this strategy was pretty much superior to Theodosius. The battle started and lasted 2 days. In the first day, the Christians were defeated, but Arbogast was decided to not destroy them totally because their troops were tired. So he preferred to stop a bit, to wait in order to rest and to fortify the encampment. After that event, we are late in the night. We have two versions. The, let's say, official version, official with these fingers, and the version believed by modern historians. The official version is that at that point, Theodosius started to pray on a mountain, and this is a funny thing because in Slovenia, people claimed to have found the exact spot where Theodosius prayed. I don't know.
They must have some insight
In what way,
persuaded
but
everyone else.
yes, exactly. Theodosius, in any case, prayed, and God sent an help to him, sent a very strong wind, who basically destroyed the pagans with blows, with rain, and with
what happens is the strong wind makes the arrows and missiles of Eugenius's side
yes,
turn back and hit his own troops.
Yes, this is what Theodosius said, or people near to him said. And this storm, this blizzard, was the main reason to the defeat of the pagans and the winning of the Christians who captured Eugenius, killed him, and then after some days found also the lifeless body of Arbogast around the Alps, and also yes, because he suicided probably, and also the Christians found the body of Nicomaco Flavianus too, who cut his veins like the old ways, because he liked a lot the old ways and stuff. Because it was over. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. What the historians in reality think today is that probably in the night some people of the army of Arbogast moved to the encampment of Theodosius in order to have a parley. Probably the people of some Frankish groups, because Arbogast was a Frank, and they were scared that he was obtaining too much power, and with too much power he could have been nominated the king of Franks, and they didn't want it, because they wanted to rule the Franks or their tribes of Franks themselves. We have to consider that the Franks were not like a single tribe. We had many tribes of Franks who believes that they are Franks because of a common background, but in reality they have different chiefs and different goals. So these Franks moved to Theodosius' camp and basically were bribed. Theodosius promised them gold, land inside the Roman empires, and etc. Yes, they agreed, and in the morning, when Arbogast moved in order to finish off what remained of the army of the Christians, the Franks backstabbed him, and this was totally unexpected. So the pagan army was defeated by this double attack from the traitors and the Christians, of course. And this is what makes sense in order to let the Christians win a battle who was basically already lost. Why the Battle of the Frigidos was so important? The Battle of the Millennium, as I said, because the loss of the pagans of the Frigidos basically condemned the West. Theodosius was not a stupid person. He was smart, of course, because you are not an emperor by random. You are an emperor because you are a smart man. In most of cases, in most.
Had the
not for all the people. Yes.
Crisis, so he had something to him.
Yes, Theodosius sent the Goths in the front line in order to let them to be slaughtered. So he thought, we won against the pagans, and we also have the Goths slaughtered, and we have no more the Goths problems, because Goths won the empire's army in Adrianople just some years before the Battle of the Frigidos. Unfortunately, Alaricus, the leader of the Goths, was aware of this idea. So after the battle, he said, like, okay, we were your cannon fodder in the battle, but now we want lands and we want gold.
I believe one of the tales of what happens is that when they return to the Balkans, where they've been given land by Theodosius, they found that a lot of it's been raided because their armies have all been in the west, and a Sarmatian raid has managed to get across the Danube and devastate their land, which is used as the reason for why Alaric leads the Gothic revolt against Arcadius.
Yes, because Theodosius was already dead, so the Goths rebelled, raided and devastated the Balkans, and after that they moved to Italy and sieged Rome, and in the end moved to Gaul, creating the Gothic kingdom into Gaul. And also we had another problem, the fact that the Battle of the Frigidos from the pagan side was made up with the most important legions from the Gaul and Italy. Basically, 1 man on 3 was on the Battle of the Frigidos, and the loss in this battle was the main turning point, in order to not to be possible to defend the Gaul again against the barbarians. So in a few years, the barbarians will enter Gaul, the province, of course, and nobody will be able to stop them. And if we have to, yes,
just to add to the military situation, is that Theodosius takes armies, enough troops from both armies to fully man the east. So he has an army in the Balkans, the army of Illyricum and the army of Thrace, the 2 armies in the emperor's presence, the army of the east, and so he takes 5 armies of comitatenses, so the field troops, and then the rest are left to the west. But there does seem to be a disparity in the troops that have been left to the west, and I think it's quite telling that 5 years later, after the Battle of Frigidos, where colossal loss of life, I mean, even the Goths, I think they sent something like 30,000 men or something like that, and so you can imagine how many Romans and other foederati troops were involved, and I think 2/3 of them get killed in the battle, or it's some colossal number of Gothic death, and you can imagine the Romans suffered fairly heavy casualties as well. And so 5 years later, you have the big crossing of the Rhine by a whole slew of Germanic tribes, such as the Vandals and Alans and Franks and so on. So it really weakens the West in such a way that leaves it very vulnerable.
Yes, and also we have to consider that after the Frigidos, the new emperor in the West was Honorius. Honorius, we totally agree. I suppose that he was one of the worst emperor in the Western history and in the history of the whole empire, because one of the main decisions was to flee from Britain. But without evacuating the legions of Britain before it. So at one point, he decided, okay, we leave Britain, and the army in Britain, oops, I forgot about it. And so
there wasn't any army left in Britain, because the usurper Constantine III had removed all of them.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Philip had also removed several comitatenses from Britain, so that I think the only major units left in Britain were the Limitani garrison troops. So I mean, making Britain look to its own defences. I think maybe in the circumstances, it was perhaps the right thing to do. In that Honorius couldn't do anything for Britain at the time, since Constantine III had taken over Gaul. But at the same time, by doing that, he never, once Gaul had been retaken by Constantius III, they never went back to Britain.
Exactly.
But
Yes,
Honorius,
this was the key point.
not the best emperor in the world.
No, not at all. Like Andronicus II, as we spoke in our last live streaming.
Indeed. So, if you have any other points, I've noticed we've actually been talking for over an hour now, which is.
Oh yes,
it's gone quickly. So, if you would like, what we could do is look at some questions from our audience.
Yes, with joy. I saw many messages. Maybe people are talking with each other.
I think there's been a bit of that, but I mean, if you see a question that catches your eye, then we can answer it. And if you have any questions, type them up, and we can answer them.
Okay, I'm trying to find some questions. There is a question from Errol, but I cannot answer to it. Like, what happened to the Zeus sculpture in Constantinople? Sorry, I don't know. Probably.
I suspect
it was destroyed.
Yeah. Either demolished by Empress Joffrus, the wife of Alexius III, who had a lot of pagan statues torn down or defaced, or smashed to pieces in the sack of Constantinople.
Yes.
Which one? All of them. But yes. I have one here by Ottoman History Hub. He says, it seems like the rise of Eastern religions during the 3rd century crisis made it easier for Christianity to spread in the following century. Thoughts? I don't know if it made the rise of religions like Mithraism and the cult of Sol Invictus made it easier for Christianity. But there does seem to be a trend long before the 4th century, in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, for more organized and more, shall we say, focused religions to come about. So like Manichaeanism in the 3rd century, Mithraism, the cults of Isis and other religions, rather than just Roman.
Well, for what I can say about it, the Eastern religions like Mithraism were very unattractive for new people because the community was pretty much closed. They didn't proselytize, and also to enter the community was difficult because mysteric religions, you have to access to the mysteries is a long process, etc. So in this way, Christianity was pretty much unmatched. So I don't know if Eastern religion are related to the facility, to the way Christianity used to spread so fast. But for what I think, Christianity itself was pretty much the most important religion and the most applicable religion, let's say. If you are a Roman and you want to change your religion, Christianity is the religion for you.
Yeah.
Mithraism is just a religion for some kind of people, for soldiers, for example. Yeah, exactly.
It's a bit like Masons today, in that you have to know someone to get into it, and how the cult of Mithras works is you have these kind of internal hierarchies like birds,
Yes.
sheep, and so on, and you go up that, and it. I think
There
it
is,
works.
yep.
Mithraism worked a little bit like that.
Yes, this is why now we are not Mithraist, of course.
But I think also you do see a lot of examples of Romans converting to Christianity from a previous religion, like just a few good examples, like St. Augustine from Manichaeanism to Christianity, St. Anthony, who was a pagan, and then he went to a I think he went to just went to a church service, and then he converted to Christianity. And also, perhaps the most famous is St. Paul, of course, Jewish priest who converts on his road to Damascus, and then spends the rest of his life proselytizing and talking about Christianity. So you do have a lot of examples of people converting to Christianity. But you do have a disparity of people doing it the other way around. So Julian is probably the best example I can think of someone who started as a Christian and converted to paganism. In his case, Neoplatonism. But there is a massive disparity of people that we know about converting from Christianity to paganism rather than the other way around.
Absolutely agree. We have a new important and interesting question here from Antonio. He said, could you guys talk a bit about the conversion of gods of a Greek-Roman pantheon into Christian saints? This is basically one of the key points to the victory of Christianity. Because we have spoke about the intolerant side of Christianity, the fight, the persecutions, the laws of Thessalonica and stuff. But Christianity was also tolerant in some ways, and one of these way was to gather all the pagan people in a village and say, okay, you are venerating your wood deity or what do you want, and this you can continue to do this, but you are not venerating a deity but just a human being, emanation of a deity, and so on, so you can continue to do it, but you are Christian now. And also in some cases there are ancient legends dated back to like Stone Age, from Celtic background, etc., who were translated into Christian mythology. So in this way, Christianity basically just covered the paganism with a very small veil and continue to follow a tradition without breaking it. So in this way, most of the saints are in fact pagan deities or expressions of pagan traditionalism.
Yeah.
One example is an Irish goddess, Brigida, one name like it, and who were transformed into a Christian person, a saint Christian person. Like, for example, if you are a person venerating Mars, and I, Christian priest, say to you, okay, Mars is not a god, is a Christian missionary, so you can keep venerating Mars, but Mars is a Christian figure.
Yeah, and I think also there's an element of what lots of Christian prelates would do, rather than just kind of, here's the New Testament, read it and do everything in it, is kind of do it in parcels. So we want you to, especially for people in the countryside that might not really care about the consanguinity of Christ or whatever, but you do it in you get them to learn the Lord's Prayer, and they probably pray anyway, or do some sort of veneration to something. And you go, well, when you're doing that, you address your prayers to God rather than Mars, and you do more kind of palatable things. And as things go along, you start introducing more of the Christian doctrine, but you start very simply and just get the like local priests getting across the very basic message to the common people, just like how St. Paul kind of does his talk in the School of Athens. It's like he doesn't reel off a huge tome of what the New Testament's about. It's just kind of like Christianity in a nutshell, and then you get those people to endorse that, and then you go from there. So it's it was a very long process in some ways, although officially Christianity had taken hold, for the people to kind of actually get to the point of Christianity that they would be in the, say, High Middle Ages, where everyone knew who, like, God, how God works and everything like that, and virtue and vice and so on. That took much longer, or at least the Christian conception of it.
Well, if you have to consider a thing, basically in some rural part of Europe, even nowadays, we have people who are Christians by name, but in fact they are worshipping pagan gods. For example, here in Italy, there are, especially in the south, like I don't know how to say it, but one day per year you took a wooden figure of a saint, and you move around the village worshipping this saint. Then you put the saint down, make some sacrifices, offer him or it food, water, wine, whatever, and then the religious event is over. This is basically like venerating a pagan idol. Simply, this pagan idol has not the shape of like a wooden creature, but like a Christian saint.
I think that ties back a little bit to what I was just saying, how sort of palatable Christianity is, where you've got like once the pagan cults go, you have cults to various saints, like the cult of like icons and stuff like that, where which later on in the empire's history have the whole iconoclasm issue. But it is a similar kind of there are similarities between the two. It's like I worship God, but I pray to this icon of St. George or St. Eugenius or St. something.
Yes.
Someone. Yeah. So there's that. There is an interesting question about Arianism and what role it played in the late empire, which I think I think we'll answer that one and then probably bring this to a close, because
yes, it's like an hour, more than 1 hour and a half. So,
Arianism.
Well, Arianism at one point seemed to be one, if not the one, ways of see Christianity, and it was the most important one to see Christianity, because Arianism was particularly popular among the barbarians and the barbarians troop who served inside the Roman Empire. And probably the fact that we are not Arians today, because if I remember well, even Julian was Arian in the first years before to convert to paganism.
Constantius II was a form of Arianism, so it's and although he did also employ lots of Nicene Christians, but yes, it's I think you're correct on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, carry on.
So basically, the Christian of the Council of Nicene tried for a long time to destroy Arianism with the power of the law, the power of the religion, and with the army too. Because when Constantine decided that the true Christianity was Nicene Christianity, started a soft war against the Arianism. And in the end, Arianism basically stopped to exist in a few centuries because it was chained to the barbarians. So once the barbarians are over or integrated into Nicene Christianity, Arianism has no more reason to exist. The difference with another heresy, if you can say it is an heresy, the Coptic heresy, even is not an heresy in reality, but is an heresy compared to the Nicene cult. The Coptic survived because the Coptic was chained not just to people of Egypt, but also to the land of Egypt. So Coptic was the religion of the people of the Egypt. So this gave them enough strength to survive every kind of tentative of trial to eradicate the Coptic religion. And also, last but not last, Egypt was the most rich province in the empire. So one point is to eradicate some tribes of barbarian, and the other point is to eradicate the most important province into your empire.
Yeah, and I think also for Arianism, or especially coming back to Theodosius, is that by making not only Christianity but Nicene Christianity the official religion of the empire, it, unlike in the 4th century where you had two Arian emperors, Valens and Constantius II, you don't have any Arian emperors after that. I mean, you do get emperors of other religious dogmas like Heraclius and monothelitism.
Yes,
you don't really have an Arian again, and also in the barbarian kingdoms, as you said, they eventually convert to Nicene Christianity, like the Franks and Visigoths.
Yes, starting from the Franks, if I remember well, all of them in the end converted to Nicene Christianity.
Well, I think we'll bring it to a close there. I think we've covered quite a lot, actually. It's all been very interesting. The whole
82 minutes, so it's pretty much a good time, I suppose.
Yeah. And yes, so just to round off, would you say that Eugenius is the last stand of Roman paganism?
In fact, yes, because the Battle of the Frigidos was the turning point of the Roman paganism. Eugenius was not the last champion of the paganism, if you can speak about it. For example, we have Marcellinus, the magister in Dalmatia, who was a pagan. And we have also another figure I like a lot, Emperor Anthemius, one of the last emperors of the West Roman Empire, who was and he was pagan and an Eastern pagan, and he tried to not to spread the paganism, but to save what was remained. But he just ruled for a few years and then was killed by Rismer. So he is another romantic figure, because we people of Europe like a lot underdogs, people who fight for a cause and then lost. And maybe the last champion of the paganism was Anthemius, if we speak about a person with a bit of power trying to let people worshipping pagan gods to survive inside the Roman Empire, of course.
Yeah, but it's Eugenius and the Battle of the Frigidos where the large scale
yes
discussion comes to an end.
Yes, because with the victory of Eugenius, the war could have changed. Of course, Christianity would not have been eradicated, but maybe we could have had some space for the other religions, and maybe we would have some kind of minor pagan cult even nowadays.
I think it's very possible. So that's it. Thank you very much for coming on, Emanuele. It's been a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you for your time, for the time of all the people who listened to us. I saw a lot of people, a lot of comments, and I'm very glad of it.
I hope everyone enjoyed our chat about the last stand of Roman paganism and Eugenius and all of that. And thank you for watching. Thank you, Emanuele. And this has been Eastern Roman History.